Velma is an unfunny, terribly written, badly drawn piece of shit that has only been created because Mindy Kaling has tons of unresolved issues from high school that she decided instead of going to see a therapist and trying to solve them, she would rather put them out on TV and show the world just how mentally unstable she is, as she tries to rationalize her self-made problems. Now I'm going to try some armchair psychology here, but I think I understand why Velma has such a horrible personality. It's because deep down, Velma wishes to be a popular, attractive, well-loved girl with a rich boyfriend.
But whenever I used to make out with my hand, I called it Fred.
In other words, she wishes to be Daphne, but the problem is she has lost the genetic lottery. She is a very short, non-attractive, chubby woman, so she has two choices to make. The first is to play the best hand she can with the cards she has been dealt, but the best Velma can hope for is that even if she works very hard to clean herself up, she will only turn out average looking at best.
Brian, I present to you your polished turd for the evening.
The second option, which is the easiest for Mindy, sorry Velma, to do, is to double down on her flaws and not to try anything because she has a fear of rejection, so she has learned to double down on her faults.
I was never that popular, which was fine. I always took pride in not fitting the mold.
She also hates what reminds her of what she can never be, which is why she despises all of the attractive women in her high school and is ecstatic when she gets the opportunity to make them as ugly as she is. And all of this shows us that she doesn't actually believe the point she is saying. We can see that she is so desperate to be a popular girl like Daphne that in the previous episodes when she tried to improve herself, the very first thing she did was try to dress like a slut because she was trying to emulate her. This failed and everybody still thinks she's ugly, which is why she keeps Shaggy around for compliments and resources, because even though she doesn't like him at all as he is a male feminist and constantly tries to fuck her, but Shaggy provides her with what she craves and in return she gives him nothing, just like every other loser who pays for OnlyFans. These two episodes are a giant mental breakdown of all of Mindy Kaling's insecurities, with each episode catering to a personal grievance that she suffered in high school. Episode 3 is about Velma questioning her sexuality, and episode 4 is a revenge fantasy about making her high school crush fall for her and then rejecting him, which I guarantee is what happened to Mindy in high school, and this is her trying to cope with being humiliated. Now let's dive into the plot, and I hope you have a gas mask with you because we are about to wade knee deep in shit. Episode 3 begins with Velma obsessing over Daphne as she kissed her last night, and also the fact that she might be joining yet another diverse group as well.
You possibly being gay is a huge deal.
Why?
This shows how horrible these people are. They would rather talk about Velma's sexuality than trying to find a serial killer that is out there murdering people. But no, these two don't seem to give a shit about Fred as he is lying in jail. Velma says that the file Daphne gave her reveals that the last place her mother's phone was at Fred's house.
Mazel on your first kiss, Velma.
Does anyone want to take a guess at whose father he is?
You told her your dad?
He's a therapist.
If I was Shaggy's dad, I would get a DNA test because Shaggy did not get any of his genes. The school then has an assembly and we see Shaggy's mum being respected. Can you guess what the reaction is to Shaggy's dad?
Good morning, my students!
So after Shaggy's dad being embarrassed by the entire school, Velma shows her wonderful personality to him.
Your dad is worse for teen mental health than waist trainers.
You're a fucking ugly bitch.
I do not know what Shaggy sees in her. Honestly, she is completely unlikable. Shaggy's dad then continues to be humiliated with his wife not giving a fuck, and she goes on to say that all of the women are to take a self-defense class.
Why don't the boys have to take a don't murder girls class?
Uh-oh, retard alert!
That's because the overwhelming majority of men don't kill people, Velma, you dumb fuck. And unsurprisingly, serial killers are going to keep on killing, whether or not they attend your shitty feminist class, Velma, you fat retard. But as idiotic as Velma's question was, Shaggy's mother gives an even stupider answer.
I only have $50 in the budget to combat centuries of toxic masculinity.
Well, we have learned that the principal, Shaggy's mother, is just as much of a retard as Velma is. Also, we now know the reason why she hates her husband so much.
I just got my mom to admit she never wanted kids.
So the ones in charge of the self-defense class is Daphne's interracial lesbian police officer mums, as they seem to have tons of free time even though there's a serial killer on the loose. But I guess trying to capture him is not as important as teaching a shitty self-defense class at school. Later on, Velma tries to meet meet Fred at prison and says to Shaggy that she is conflicted as she wants to be gay with Daphne but also wants to get fucked by Fred because as much of a feminist as she is, she still wants to taste rich white dick.
Ironic.
Back to school, Velma meets with Daphne in the girls' toilets and they talk about their relationship.
You were dating Fred until he went to prison.
That's right, she was going out with Fred and immediately dumped him when the news dropped, as she had already moved on, which shows exactly how loyal and trustworthy of a girlfriend she is. Velma says that she likes Fred even though she is the reason he went to prison in the first place, as she broke into his house and blamed him for the murders. But she's just forgotten all of that. As they both head back to class, Velma, for the first time in this show, makes a good point.
How will fighting girls help us defend ourselves against attacks from guys? Is first prize a gun?
This was probably by accident, or some overworked intern managed to sneak this in, as he knew the writers of the show would never double check their work for mistakes. We cut to the prison and Shaggy is not attending school because he needs to ask Fred about Velma's mother. Now you would think that Velma would be doing this, but she is too busy trying to get fingered by Daphne. Shaggy asks Fred about the mother, but he says that he doesn't know anything when another prisoner comes up to him and says,
You're wasting your time, buddy. Romantic relationships between old friends rarely work out.
And what is Shaggy's reaction to some legitimate advice?
That's not true!
Have some self-respect!
Shaggy gets a black eye and asks his dad for advice. He says that all he needs is a cardigan to make people feel comfortable enough to confess to him. Now this show makes fun of Shaggy's dad every chance it gets, but he ends up giving the correct advice whenever he is asked. Shaggy returns to the prison with a cardigan and now is able to get Fred to confess. He first says that his dad stood him up and then says he saw Velma's mother.
What was she doing there?
I don't know. My dad told me never to pay attention to women over 35.
That's good advice!
We cut back to the school and a shit fight tournament is happening, which is boring all the way up to the finals where Daphne and Velma meet. Before they fight each other, they meet in the girls' restroom and Daphne says that she does not want to go out with Velma because dating a cave troll would hurt her popularity. Before they fight, Daphne's lesbian mother mentions Velma's social media account.
And with the social media reach of, she says she's too good for it.
No, Velma, it's because you're a big fat loser who couldn't even get one person to follow her. So because Velma was rejected by Daphne, she reads out her diary in front of everybody at the school in the hopes of making her look like she is mentally unstable.
You are stupid.
Has Velma forgotten that's the whole reason TikTok exists? It's for women to pretend that they have a mental illness that they use for attention. It's the whole reason why it was made. This plan of yours would only make Daphne more popular, not less, you retard. So Velma's plan doesn't work and she is sent to the therapist office because she needs to apologise for stealing Daphne's diary.
I have to apologize? She kicked me so hard my tubes are now tied.
Believe me, Velma, they were never going to be used anyway. Shaggy's dad yet again gives decent advice in wanting Velma to open up more, but her response is,
Okay, that feels smart, but it's coming from you, so...
You're a cunt. You're a cunt.
Later on, we see Shaggy driving Velma around town yet again because that is all he does, and he tells her that Fred had nothing to do with her mother's disappearance and Fred is innocent.
Isn't it a little comforting to see a rich white guy get wrongly convicted for once?
I hate so much about the things that you choose to be.
No, Shaggy, you dumb fuck. Why would anybody being falsely imprisoned be comforting for you? Unless you're a complete fucking psychopath. So Velma and Shaggy know for a fact that Fred is innocent and the killer is still out there. So what do they do next? Well, Shaggy takes Velma to Daphne's house because rather than trying to prove Fred's innocence and get him out of jail, she would rather waste more time with her stupid fucking gay relationship with Daphne. Velma tells Shaggy to wait for her.
Wait for me, okay? Unless you feel like getting me a snow cone and immediately coming back.
We have seen several scenes of Shaggy being an embarrassment to men everywhere and should never be considered one. Velma and Daphne get into a boring conversation where they kiss and make up, but Velma says this.
But I'm also, kill me, super attracted to Fred.
You sound insane. Do you realize that? You should be medicated.
Now, why is it that Velma takes every opportunity to insult Fred and won't help him get out of prison, and yet still wants to fuck him even though she has both Shaggy and Daphne to use? Maybe it's because deep down Velma only sees Fred as having any value. Shaggy has to leave her behind because he forgot his appointment at the prison, and of course Velma is annoyed by this.
Now I have to walk. I have literally never been madder.
You may be asking, why did she make Shaggy wait even though she lives next door? Well, she has done this for one simple reason, and that is because she is a vampire who must suck out any and all male energy from him until he is nothing more than a hollow husk of what we used to call a man. This is the process in which she turns men into simps, and we can see the same process happening throughout the world, usually through OnlyFans. Shaggy ends up at the prison, but it's on fire, and his father is there only because the plot needs him to drop a business card, which is for an insane asylum. Like anybody gives a fuck, and the last scene is Velma at home, pretending that her hand is Fred. And that's the end of episode 3. I wish this was it, but unfortunately there is another terrible episode to go. Episode 4 starts with Velma recounting her childhood.
But I was never that popular.
Of course not, you're a cunt. Your own family don't even like you, and they're supposed to.
Which was fine. I always took pride in not fitting the mold.
That's because you were a loser and you couldn't be popular, so you never tried to because you knew deep down that you would fail, which goes to show just how insecure you are. Also notice how in the flashback another Asian girl is into Fred. What happened to Mindy in high school? Did she get rejected by a white man who decided to upgrade to an Asian girl? And she has held on to this bitterness ever since. It cuts to the modern day and everybody is celebrating the fact that Fred is in jail.
Fred is probably innocent.
Velma is aware that the killer is still out there and doesn't even bother to investigate the murders because it does not involve her, so she doesn't give a shit. But after a third girl is murdered, even the retarded police force recognise that Fred could not be the murderer, so they decide to let him go. The town has a meeting about the 3 dead girls, but Velma does what she does best and somehow twists the conversations which should be about the victims and makes it all about herself.
How come no one ever cared this much about my missing mom?
It's all about me!
The sheriff goes on to say that the killer only kills attractive women, so Velma being fat and ugly is ruled out. The police then decide to give the 5 most attractive women in high school police protection, and this makes Velma very angry.
Wait, so a couple of middle-aged white dudes are gonna decide which of us are hottest?
Velma acts like she doesn't give a shit about appearances, but is clearly dripping with envy because these men and society at large see her as a pig and would never consider her to be attractive. They avoid arguing with her and let her decide who the top 5 are. Velma struggles to make a list because deep down she wants to put herself in it, but knows she can't because everybody would laugh at her. Shaggy walks in and is obsessed with trying to get Velma to explain why she likes Daphne. Well, Shaggy, that's because unlike you, she is not licking her asshole every 10 minutes like a dog in heat.
This is exactly the problem with this list.
It's a list on who is the most attractive girl in the school. Of course it's going to have men's opinions on it, you dozy bitch. Otherwise there would be no fucking point in making one if there aren't any men to find women attractive.
Men make everything about them and what they want.
Not me. I'm an ally.
No, Shaggy, you're a male feminist, and just like every other male feminist, deep down you are a fucking snake that bides its time waiting for a moment of weakness before pouncing on Velma.
There's a right way to be hot, and I'm not it.
Yes, that's true.
Guys even teach us to be ashamed of our own bodies.
What Velma is trying to say is that men should have zero standards and should just go out with fat, hairy, unwashed women because they are just as valuable as clean, good-looking ones.
Every little kid knows how to draw a penis, but make a little kid draw a vagina and what happens?
In the quiet words of the Virgin Mary, come again.
But make a little kid draw a vagina and what happens?
You filthy, disgusting perverts!
Shaggy then says that they should get Fred's help because he has just been released from prison. Why on earth would Fred ever help her when she is the sole reason he is in prison? Because the writing is dog shit, that's why. Fred gives Velma the list of the hottest girls in school, and in return for his help she gives him a book on feminism. Now why would she give him a piece of shit like that for a gift? Well, that's because when Fred reads reads it, he starts to find hideous women attractive as well. Think about what this scene is trying to say, that attractive rich men can be coerced by the power of feminism into liking ugly women. This is a fantasy that Mindy and other feminists have invented because they don't want to live in the real world like the rest of us. We cut to Shaggy meeting up with Daphne as he wants to emulate her behaviour in order to make Velma like him. Does Shaggy have any other personality other than obsessing over Velma? They go on a pointless side story tracking down a rock that was thrown at her house, which leads them to a mine, but they don't even bother to go in. Velma's job for the episode is to make the 5 hottest girls in school as unattractive as possible because the police don't want to waste any more money in protecting them all day. This is Velma's wet dream as she gets to ruin and destroy women who have something that she can never have. Also, she can feel good about herself.
So you're saying I get to actually release these girls from the shackles of the male gaze?
This show is so dumb it doesn't even understand what it's actually saying. That without the male gaze, women would turn into smelly, unshaven, obese slobs.
So we have one day to unlearn a lifetime of internalized misogyny.
So Velma goes on a disgusting montage to make them as vile as she is, but it does not work because nobody can be that gross. The next day, the girls show up to school, but they end up not committing to what she wants.
It's an exercise in slut-shaming.
Want to hear how this genius came up with this solution?
No woman should ever have to change who she is or how she dresses to not be murdered.
A murderer is looking for attractive women, and these retards are so vain that they would rather walk around with a police escort all day rather than being inconvenienced and taking some personal responsibility for their own actions by trying to avoid putting themselves into dangerous situations. They are like children at this point.
Your definition of womanhood is even more restrictive than ours.
Thank you!
Velma turns up to school the next day dressed like a goblin.
Why?
Velma's stepmother goes into labour, but the crowd does what every crowd does and tries to take pictures of her. The ambulance then pulls up but cannot reach her. Now you may be asking, why don't the paramedics just get out of the van and take her back to the ambulance?
Good question.
So because the paramedics won't get out of the van, Velma needs the hot girls to make a distraction and draw the crowds away. They have a conversation and Velma comes to an answer about how they are different types of women but are both equally valuable.
Just like how you're all women who don't want to own shorts that cover your butt.
Why do you always talk like a whore?
I'm a woman who doesn't want to own it, and one isn't better than the other.
Slight problem on that front.
The major problem with your logic, Velma, is that these girls have something to offer. Men want to fuck them, whereas you have absolutely nothing to offer anybody. So no, you are not the same as them. You're not even on the same planet. So as Velma goes on to assault people, Fred sees her, and because he has been brainwashed by the power of feminism, how can a team of writers be this atrocious at their jobs? Thank fuck that these idiots aren't allowed to work on something that is important, like food or electricity. Velma arrives at the hospital and once again manages to somehow twist the conversation from being about her newborn half-sister to herself, because if there is one thing that Velma is great at, it's making everything about her.
I was pretty great today, wasn't I? Possibly the greatest woman of all time.
I hate you.
The last scene is Fred showing up at Velma's house because he wants to replace Shaggy as her new simp.
Well, I'm glad you've learned to appreciate inner beauty. Right, well, I also prefer inner beauty.
Liar!
That's a laugh coming from you, Velma. You have no beauty, inside or out. Velma then rejects Fred and tries to make him feel bad. There are 3 things I noticed about this scene. Number 1, now that Fred has become a pathetic loser who wants Velma, she is no longer interested in him, as by becoming a simp, he is no longer valuable as a boyfriend, and can now just be there to provide resources like Shaggy does. Number 2, it shows that with the power of feminism, men can be brainwashed into liking things that they would have found disgusting before. And number 3, this is nothing more than Mindy Kaling's revenge fantasy, because I would bet money that there was a rich white guy in school that she wanted to fuck, but he rejected her, most likely for an Asian woman. And if she could go back 25 years ago and make him ask her out, she would reject him to make him feel the pain she felt, because in the past she was the ugly girl in high school who was rejected and never got over it. it. And that's the end of episode 4. As much as I despise the show for its writing, lack of humour and terrible characters, I also find it fascinating that we get to see into the mind of a bitter aging feminist who is about to hit menopause and is obsessed with high school because those were the worst years of her life and she wishes that she could go back and change them.